Good evening and welcome to the Newburyport Councilor at Large Candidate Forum presented by the Greater Newburyport Chamber of Commerce and Industry and the Daily News, and broadcast on WNBP AM and FM radio and a Port Media Local Access channel tonight. I'm Pete Falcone from WNBP Radio. Now the questions will come from, to my left, John McCone, the editor of the Daily News of Newburyport, and Kim Goby, the chair-elect of the Greater Newburyport Chamber of Commerce. Our timekeeper is Ann Orman. We have 9 candidates on the panel and 90 minutes for the program, so the forum will go like this. Each candidate will have 90 seconds for opening remarks. Each candidate will have 1 minute to answer the questions that are given by John and Kim, and each candidate will have 2 minutes for a closing statement. We have drawn the order from a hat, and that's the way they are seated up on the stage. We'll use that order for the opening remarks and questions, and we'll go in the opposite order for the closing statements. Now, we're asking the audience to please be courteous and quiet during the forum, and please hold your applause until after each candidate gives their closing statements. So we will get right to it and invite the candidates to give their opening statements, and we will start with Sheila Mullins.
Tonight and for
going to want to use the microphone.
I will use the microphone. Thank you for the reminder. I'm happy to have been involved in many different aspects in Newburyport. I was the clerk of the Charter Commission. I worked on Charter Yes to pass the charter. I am a founder and former executive board member of the Merrimack River Feline Rescue Society. I was co-chair of the Community Preservation Act here, and I'm a friend of the Council on Aging, a member of the Custom House, Parker River Clean Water Association, the Newburyport Preservation Trust. I was also the format developer and one of the question creators for the CEB candidate interviews for the 2009-2011 City Council candidates interviews. My husband Jerry and I are 26-year residents of Newburyport. I am also an interior designer and personal cook. Over the last 26 years, I have seen many changes here, and I can see to an extent what direction we are going in. The results change can bring can either be negative or positive, but one thing is certain: change will occur. I am enough of a student of history to understand where we were and how we got here, what's happening now, and where we're likely to go. So many things are happening that affect our community that will define it going forward. We need to manage those changes. Your voice needs to be heard, and I would like to be your voice. I am looking forward to jumping in to help the city move forward more. Thank you.
Wow, that was
Bruce Vogel.
Good evening. The hope tonight is that my words will result in your voting for me. How surprisingly. I, like you, am passionate about the issues. I'm also passionate about getting things done. So who am I and what am I all about? Well, to start, I'm the owner of a business here in Newburyport, and I spend many mornings, no doubt, saying hello to a lot of you. I own Plum Island Coffee Roasters. And if you haven't been there for coffee, I invite you down. And as we discuss the issues, if I can step back a moment, as we discuss the issues, please know that my manner and my character and my perspective and my approach all come from real life experiences, and one of those is the Coffee Roasters. I'm a former 2-term counselor, and prior to that, I was on the Youth Commission. I was an original member of the Youth Commission and chaired that for 3 years. I spent nearly a decade as a union rep negotiating at TWA. If you remember just one thing about me tonight, please know that my life experiences, especially that with TWA, taught me the benefit of using dialogue as a tool to reach consensus. I have no time for mudslinging. I have no time for argument. As an elected official, my goal is to get things done. Thank you. I look forward to your vote.
Next is Ari Herzog.
Thank you, Pete, and thank you to the Chamber, Daily News, and WNBP for bringing us together tonight. And thank you for coming out, and to you watching wherever you are. I look at the faces to my left and to my right, and I smile. Some of you may know that I moved to Newburyport 6 years ago to work for Mayor John Moak. I was his Assistant Chief Administrative Officer. Within the first few days of the job, he introduced me to the City Council and the school committee, knowing we'd work together. And that's when I met Ed, Barry, and both Bruces. 4 years ago, when I campaigned for City Council and walked around the city, I met Sheila. Laurel initially contacted me with constituent concerns. 3 years ago, it was about streetlights. And 2 years ago, in my last campaign, I met Megan and Lindy. Our relationship is civil and professional, but it's also social and friendly. And I almost wish that all of us could be elected to the City Council because, well, we work well together. We're friendly. And I'm running for re-election for a third term for 4 simple words. I love the job. Tonight, you'll hear from me and other candidates discuss the issues that matter most. I look forward to hearing from them share their passion for the job I love. And I hope you'll walk away tonight with an appreciation for the civility and the sociability that will comprise your next council. Vote however you want, but I do ask for one of your votes. Thank you.
Next will be Bruce Menon.
Can people hear me? Do I need to use the microphone? Okay. It's no surprise I'm somewhat to the left of Ari here, up on the dais. My name is Bruce Menon. I am a candidate for City Councilor at large. I have spent the last 12 years, exciting years, on the school committee, but I also have some other experience here in the community. I was the founding chair of the Youth Commission, originally appointed by Mary Carrier, who I know is here. I've also been involved in the Revenue Task Force, the skate park siting group. Essentially, I have fun, but I take this very seriously. To me, governance really is a conversation that the community has about who we are and who we want to be. Who are we going to be? And I really think it's important. It's been a privilege to serve. I think if you're going to do it right, you need to have transparency and accountability. That's why I ran 12 years ago. That's why I'm running now. If you don't have transparency, you don't have accountability. If you don't have accountability, you don't have trust from the community. It's a really nasty circle. So I would make as one of my concerns as a city councilor, I would be really interested in making sure that the community is engaged, that the community is involved with what we're doing, and that, please stop. Oh, I wasn't supposed to read that, was I?
Our next candidate is Lindy Lamphere.
I have a Bachelor of Science degree in Business Education and Management from Salem State University, and I taught briefly as a public school teacher, actually for a while here, right here in this building. And I now work as an accountant and manager of a professional office building in Newburyport. I'm married to Dr. Kevin Lamphere for 27 years, and I have 2 adult children, David and Jennifer Lamphere. I'm running for councilor at large because I have lived most of my married life in Newburyport, and I raised my family in this city, and I love it. I became more politically involved the past few years because I felt that the local government was no longer listening to the homeowners and the citizens of Newburyport. I promised to listen to the citizens of Newburyport and to represent their interests and concerns. My special interest would be finding alternatives to the local historic district in order to protect the beauty and the historic elements of the downtown area, and at the same time, protect the homeowner's personal property rights.
Our next candidate is Barry Connell.
Good evening. My name is Barry Connell, and if there's a reason we're squinting here, if you're on our side of the stage, it looks like there's a train coming right down the tracks at us. Those lights are murder. I'd just like to thank you for coming out tonight, and hope that we can answer some of your questions and perhaps expose a little bit of ourselves to you so that you know what to do on November 5th. You get to vote for 5 people for City Council at large. I'm asking for 1 of your votes. Why would I want to do this? It's a question I asked myself, actually my wife put to me about 6 months ago. You think you'd like to do this again? You've been on the council for 5 terms. Do you think 10 years is enough? I said, no, I think I want to do it again. And ever supportive, she said, you're out of your mind. But the fact of the matter is that I generally enjoy working with my colleagues on the council and with our mayors. Throughout the time that I've been on the council, I've worked with a number of mayors. Always tried to cultivate a positive and mutually supportive relationship so that we can deal with the problems that present themselves. And as I go door to door, I think I get a better and better idea about what you want us to do. But there's no way to predict in advance really what we're going to be dealing with. Issues present themselves, whether or not we have an agenda to move forward, and those issues have to be dealt with. The thing I'm going to promise to you is this. I'm a school teacher. I believe in homework. I believe that a city councilor has to do the homework in order to serve your best interests, and I intend to do that from this day forward. Thank you.
Our next candidate is Megan Kinsey.
Good evening. Thank you for coming here tonight. I was proud to serve as the chair of Port Pride last year. Due to the work of a team of community members and due to your vote, we are building a brand new school, we are renovating a dilapidated one, and we will soon be breaking ground on a community senior center that was discussed for over 30 years. When we began the process, our initial team sat around a table and we decided to figure out what matters most to the voters of Newburyport. Well, what matters most to me today? How can we make Newburyport that we love even better? That's the sentiment that drove me to run for city council. There's a lot about Newburyport that matters to me. I'm a mom of 3 young sons in the Newburyport public schools. I'm really intimately aware of what's going on in the schools, what's good, what's working, and what's not. The schools matter to me. My family walks downtown. When my kids aren't being lazy, they walk to school. And we are a walking family. The sidewalks matter to me. My family's home is old and has great character, squeaky floorboards and all. Our historical homes matter to me. My kids learn to walk on our city's playgrounds, the parks. They play all sorts of athletic events on the fields. My husband's a youth coach. The athletic fields, the parks, and the playgrounds, they matter to me. We shop and dine downtown often. The success of our local businesses, it matters to me. We frequently walk our dog along the waterfront from Cashman straight down to the boardwalks. The beautification and the finality of what's going on with the waterfront, that matters to me. And finally, we pay property taxes, so balancing the budget matters to me. Newburyport matters to me, and as your councilor at large, I will work really hard for you. Thank you.
And our next candidate is Edward Cameron.
Good evening, everybody. Hope you can bear with us for the next hour and a half. I know you are keenly aware that we're the only things standing between you and the Red Sox game, so we'll try to make it at least as entertaining, but hopefully we'll hear the good stuff at the end. First of all, I want to thank the Daily News and WNBP and the Greater Newburyport Chamber of Commerce and Industry for hosting this debate. I think it's a great way for us to share our ideas, but really to talk about the things that we can do for you, because that's what we're trying to be up here, is be civil servants, public servants, and serve what you want us to do. It's great to see a lot of friendly faces out there, a lot of friendly faces who have agreed with a lot of the things that I've tried to do on the council, and a lot of friendly faces who have disagreed with virtually everything I've tried to do on the city council. But that's really what makes us a very vibrant and positive community. I think Newbury's best days are ahead of us. We are definitely heading in the right direction. You're going to hear a lot tonight about the various things that we want to do with your input, and I look forward to hearing what the other candidates have to say. And thank you for being here.
And our next candidate is Laurel Algrove.
Good evening. My name is Laurel Algrove. I'm running for councilor at large. And as some of the city councilors already know, I've made a pain in the neck of myself. But I love this city. The city has given a lot to me since I came here in 1994, and I'm interested in what the constituents have to say. I'm willing to listen. I want to be your eyes and your ears. And if you ask me a question, if I don't know it, I'm sure darn well going to look it up, because I think this is a great city, and I think it can be better. Thank you.
Now that we've met all of the candidates, I will remind the candidates that they will have 1 minute to answer the questions, which we're going to get into right now. And we're going to start with John McCone with the first question for Sheila Mullins.
Thank you, Peter. You've seen the Newburyport Redevelopment Authority's proposed plan for its waterfront property. What is your opinion of the plan? And if you are opposed to it, can you tell us what your vision is for the waterfront?
I am opposed to the plan that has been presently presented by the Newburyport Redevelopment Authority. My vision is that I am your candidate for an open, non-privatized waterfront. I have a vision and a real plan to pay for and maintain it. If we take 30% of our current parking revenues, we can take out a revenue bond and begin construction of our park. It would take about 6 years to pay off the bond. Additionally, even the NRA's own consultant said that there are grants available totaling between $500,000 and $750,000 for the park's creation. And at some time during the future, there is most likely to be a parking garage, and at that time the parking can go away or be reduced to whatever is needed. In the meantime, the same 30% of the revenues can be set aside in a trust fund to provide seed money for maintenance money. The NRA plan never actually removes all of the parking off the waterfront.
Bruce.
Do we get the question again?
Sure. You've seen the Newburyport Redevelopment Authority's proposed plan for its waterfront property. What's your opinion of the plan? And if you're opposed to it, what's your vision for the waterfront?
The plan as it exists is not favorable to me. I find the buildings to be very large and feel as though we don't need any further development in terms of retail stores or any more shopping on the waterfront. The vision that I would have for the waterfront would be where the temporary buildings are now. For example, I'd love to see an open-air pergola, perhaps in the shape of a ship's hull. I'd like to see permanent information there, perhaps the chamber as a permanent tenant, permanent bathrooms, a little bit of a historic area. And then open up the rest of the area to public use and clean up the rest of the ways to the waterfront. And in terms of paying for it, my website, vogelatlarge.com, you can take a look at that. You can see my ideas in terms of paying for that. But again, I'm opposed to the current offering that's out there. Thank you.
Thanks, Pete. You know, we all know that building construction is going to happen across the waterfront. We know it's going to happen on Waterside West, which stretches from the Black Cow to the Route 1 bridge, and we know it's going to happen on Waterside East, stretching from Oldies to the Coast Guard station. That's going to happen one way or the other. We also know that the Custom House Maritime Museum wants to expand into their rear lawn. We additionally know that New England Development wants to build a hotel or a parking garage. All this stuff is going to happen. So my take is the majority of people that I've been meeting on the campaign trail do not want to build on the central waterfront. I agree with them. Let's not build on the central waterfront. In terms of a vision, Pete, you asked me this question 2 years ago, and my response then is the same response now. My vision is the Plains of Abraham in Quebec City. The structures on the Plains of Abraham complement the park. The structures in the NRA's plan do not complement the park. Thank you.
I'm opposed to the NRA plan as it's currently constituted. I, like Sheila, believe in a non-commercial and a non-privatized waterfront. I'm also opposed to any element of the plan where the city loses control of that land, either through extended leases or sales. I am for an expanded park. I'm also aware that There could be as much as $750,000 in grants out there. The concept of a finished park, it doesn't apply for me. If you have $750,000, that's the park you build. You can expand it, and you can, you know, I'm a nonprofit. For 20 years, I've been a fundraising nonprofit executive director. I've had to raise my own salary and the salary of all of my staff and programs. I understand that there are some options out there, but more than that, I have very publicly stated that I think there may very well be some consensus out there as to what we can do, but I don't think we can get to it on our own. And I would encourage the NRA to take some of the money that they're using to fund postcards and invite a mediator in, a third-party neutral, to work with us to try to come to a consensus. And I think it's out there.
I want to leave our waterfront open and used as a public park. I do not want to see huge multi-storied buildings filled with condos and stores. I do not want to see our park land being sold to private developers. The only possible development I would like to see on the waterfront would be amenities for the boaters and the visitors to Newburyport, with maybe a public bathroom with showers, or possibly a small visitor center. Like many people I have spoken to, I am tired of the dirt parking lots. I would like to see this issue resolved, and unfortunately, I do not believe that the NRA is the entity to do it. Perhaps it is time to ask the NRA to step down and to hand this land back to the people of Newburyport. What has happened to all the money that has been received for parking? Instead of using it for costly presentations and mass mailings, I would love to see, to try to convince the people of Newburyport that they don't want an open waterfront. I would rather have them spend that money. We could have had the park already built. I want to see a beautiful water park.
I'm sorry, time.
And the question is, what is our vision for the waterfront? Well, let's acknowledge up front that the NRA owns that property and would make those decisions independent of what this council may feel at any given time, particularly during an election year. But let me lay out what I think are the advantages of expanding the park. I mean, I think that that's something we all want to see happen, expanding the park area and reducing the amount of dust and grit that silts down into the river from the dusty parking lot that exists there now. So if I had a magic wand and had the opportunity, I'd like to see the park expanded. I'd like to see some of the conditions of the park improved. Better lighting, better drainage, better policing, better supervision in general. I'd also like to see the parking lot itself paved in such a way that still drains water through the surface, yet allows us to stripe it so we can more efficiently park the cars that are going to remain there. Until a new parking garage is completed, we can't give up that entire footprint, and I wouldn't advocate that. So the question then becomes, how do we pay for it? And that's the one that nobody seems to agree on. I will say this, grant money is not the option that's going to get us there. We're no longer competitive. We're the success story. So let's keep that in mind when we move forward. Thank you.
In order for the city to bring this 40-plus year discussion to a satisfying end, we have a need to have a plan, and we need to work the plan. I see this in 3 phases or 3 objectives. First, and most importantly, the plan needs to increase our green space. Second, the plan has to be self-funded. It cannot increase our existing property taxes. That is so important. On that point, there's much discussion about a bond right now. And the fact that the incoming council might be having the opportunity to vote on the bond, the potential bond is not to be confused with the bond supported by the debt exclusion, much like the schools. So I want to make that the differentiation right now. Continuing, third, the plan has to finish the project, wrap it up with a bow, hand it back to the city. So driven by those objectives, I'm looking for a plan that meets those objectives. It might be the NRA plan, and if it's not, it's another plan. And the plan is not, for me, what my focus is. The objectives are.
I want to talk about your vision for what you want to see on the waterfront, not my vision. I've never been to Quebec City, so I can't comment about the Plains of Abraham like Councillor Herzog, so I am not here to impose my vision on you. I ran in 2007, and one of the big things that I heard from voters was to have a more open park. And by open, it didn't mean parking, it meant park. And that is my number one goal, and I think that's a goal shared by most residents here in town. To have less parking, we're going to lose revenue. I think there's a consensus that we want to have it active. And there's also a consensus that we want to keep our costs down and not take out more debt and pay more at tax time. Our taxes are due on November 1st, as I know many of you know, and we're already taking a hit on the schools, the senior center, we're still paying off the library and the high school. There's a couple of $1 million every year in operating debt that is in the city budget. So to get those, I'm okay with a little bit of limited commercial development. I don't want condos, I don't want underground parking, but I think we can find some consensus to get it done.
I am against the NRA plan. I think it's foolhardy. I think it's unnecessary. I definitely believe we should keep that open. I look at this from another viewpoint. When Mr. Leone opens the ale house, he's going to need parking, and this building, that big building's going to be there. That's going to be a loss of parking right there. And this is what people tell me. They say, where are the cars going to go? I mean, it's already a bottleneck as it is during the tourist time. And I've had people tell me, if I can't find a place to park, I'm not coming to Newburyport, and that's definitely a loss of revenue. If there's grants out there, I believe we should definitely pursue it, but let's keep it open. Let's find a way. Let's not take the easy way out.
Our next question is going to come from Kim Goby, and we're going to begin with Bruce Fogel.
All right, so we wanted to ask you all, and some of you talked about this a little bit in your opening statements, but we were hoping that you could expound a little bit or expand a little bit on your professional experience and what qualifies you to be a city councilor, if you're not already a city councilor, or what qualifications you have that are driving you to seek office again.
Well, would it be fair to use the 2 terms as city councilor and the 5 years on the youth commission and my familiarity with the city of Newburyport? Prior to that, I spent 20 years with TWA, and at 10 of those years, I worked contract negotiations for the union. I've been trained in those contract negotiations. I've been trained in the effort of using dialogue towards consensus. I understand the value of listening as opposed to speaking. We have 2 ears and 1 mouth. I try to use them accordingly. I've also have a professional marketing business. In addition to running the Plum Island Coffee Roasters, I have a marketing business that I've been involved in internet marketing for just about a decade now. And through that experience, I've also learned the idea of bringing along marketing and an understanding of a plan that I would like to bring to Newburyport. That would be one of my special interests, would be to bring along a marketing plan. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Mr. Herzog.
Thank you, Ms. Goby. So I'm running for re-election to a 3rd term. I've been serving at the pleasure of the voters for the past 4 years. I mentioned what brought me to Newburyport 6 years ago is I got a job working as Mayor Moak's Assistant Chief Administrative Officer. I was responsible for union negotiation. I was responsible for being the mayor's delegate to various boards with the City Council, the School Committee, the MBTA, and others. Before I worked in Newburyport, I worked in state government. I was a special assistant and project manager to the Governor's Secretary of Economic Development under both Romney and Patrick. And I have a Master in Public Administration. Thanks.
Thank you. Mr. Menon.
Yeah, it's going to be boring, but I'll talk to you a little bit. I've spent 12 years on the school committee, and most people can't believe that time flies, but it's been a long 12 years. We've had a lot of issues to deal with. During that time, not only have I served on every committee that the school committee has, subcommittee, but I've also served on a number of ad hoc task forces. During that period of time, the school budget has actually shrunk as a part of the city budget, but I have handled, I added it up the other day, I have handled about $250 million of this city's tax dollars in terms of planning the budget, in terms of making sure the money is spent. And, you know, I approached handling that money as if it was being spent to educate my kids, because it was being used to educate my kids. I've also served on the Charter Commission, like Bruce and like Sheila, to help write the new charter. I was the founding chair of the Youth Commission. I've negotiated 5 teacher contracts, and that's it.
Thank you. Ms. Lanfear?
I have been a public school teacher. I was an account executive for several brokerage firms specializing in tax-free municipal bonds, and I am a community organizer. And now I manage a professional office building here in Newburyport, and I do accounting, bookkeeping, payroll for my tenants.
Thank you. Mr. Connell?
Yeah. I guess there are 2 answers to the question I'd like to give. One has to do with my 10 years having served on the council. I think I've learned a lot in those 10 years, a lot more than I knew when I entered the council chambers, I can tell you that for sure. Prior to that, I'd served on the zoning board. I had organized the debt exclusion campaign to rebuild our library, the debt exclusion campaign to rebuild this building. So those are things that I've done in the public realm. In my private life, I've served as a public school teacher for most of my career. I had an 8-year stint in the State House working as the director of a legislative office, and so I think that my experience working in the State House gave me a unique understanding of how that place works and what's possible to get done there to assist the city of Newburyport, and what's unlikely to help the city of Newburyport from the state perspective. Another item I would point out is that I served 7 years on the state's radioactive waste management board. Again, negotiating with hospitals, negotiating with businesses about difficult problems to deal with their environmentally sensitive wastes.
Thank you. Ms. Kinsey?
Thank you. So professionally, I started out in a medical sales career after college. I did that for a few years, went on to graduate school, and became a teacher. Upon raising my family, I built a business as a childbirth educator. I'm a bar instructor, and currently I serve as a community engagement director for the YMCA. On the volunteer side, I've been a very active volunteer since I stepped foot in Newburyport. Newburyport Mothers Club, I served 2 terms as a president and about 7 to 8 years on the board. From there, the PTO, the Newburyport Education Foundation as a board member, the Newburyport Youth Lacrosse Association, the Newburyport Youth Soccer Association, Superintendent Search Committee. We found Susan Vaccaro, our current superintendent, through that. And then most recently, I chaired the campaign known as Port Pride. That's obviously it built the new school. It renovated the Knockamolan, and we're going to get the new community center out of that. So I'm proud of the work I've done. I've worked side by side with fellow counselors, school committee members, the mayor's office, the planning department, nonprofit leaders, and I'm happy to continue this effort as a city councilor.
Thank you. Mr. Cameron?
Thank you. I am the descendant of a long, proud line of Scottish laborers and truck drivers and Polish shoe factory workers. My parents raised myself and my 3 sisters in a typical middle-class family in Massachusetts. My mother, were she alive tonight, would be watching the Sox game instead of being here at this debate, that is for sure. My father was a public school teacher. My mother worked in a flower shop. I worked my way through college. I have pumped gas, got robbed at gunpoint, worked in a parking garage, which might come in handy someday for downtown Newburyport, hopefully. For the last 27 years, I've been working with homeless people. And how that connects to serving the public here is sometimes homeless people are very angry about the state of their lives. Sometimes they're looking for some assistance, and they're looking for somebody to listen to. And that sounds like a lot of people I've talked to in Newburyport over the last 6 years. In that time, listening is very important, but right now I manage 70 people and a $41 million budget for a nonprofit in Lowell.
Thank you. Ms. Algrove?
Well, I wish I could say I was a rock star or a runway model, but that's not the case, unfortunately. But I work in the industrial park. I work for Berkshire Manufacturing. I've followed the issues going on. I've written a lot of letters to the paper, and I'm usually not afraid to speak my mind as long as I don't get tomatoes thrown at me. But I really care about this city, and I'm passionate about what I believe in, and I want to share that with the citizens. And that's what I want to let you know, and I want to draw you into that as well. Thank you.
Thank you. And finally, Ms. Mullins.
So as not to repeat myself, I just want to say I've been extremely happy to have been involved in all the different aspects of Newburyport that I have, from various environmental issues to social issues here in Newburyport. My background as an interior designer, I think, comes into play because very often we spend our time negotiating between husbands and wives who often have very different ideas about things. And part of that I get to do every day is I get the opportunity to talk to different people. I have to learn to listen, read between the lines, and be able to offer concrete solutions and make those kinds of decisions. And that's the kind of thing that I want to be able to bring to the City Council. The other part is that because I am an interior designer, one of the things that I try to do is not to start with the idea of trying to get out of the box. I try not to have a box to start with. So I can think very creatively and very, pardon me, out of the box.
Our next question will come from John McCone, and we will address it to Ari Herzog.
Thank you, Peter. Should a local historic district proposal come up again before the City Council, can you tell us what your thoughts are about the concept of a local historic district? Do you think Newburyport needs one? If not, why not? And if so, what do you think are some of the key provisions that should be included?
It's a great question, and one that I do not have any answer to. And I'll tell you why I don't have an answer to it. Because I don't know the plan. 2 years ago, at the last at-large debate, I remember a similar question. The question was, how do all the candidates feel about the proposed local historic district? And it was October, and it had yet to reach the City Council. And I said that I supported historic preservation, as I still do. I said I supported the concept of the LHD, but my mind was open to change. And without seeing something in front of me, it's hard for me to say how I may or may not feel about something. But show me something in writing, come meet me, and I'll talk to you.
Thank you, Ari. That's a very good question. Some of you who know me know that I'm a Civil War reenactor. I really believe in history and in the importance of history. I also believe that this community has really not achieved the level of tourism that it could based on our history, based on our environment. How the LHD plan how it's created is very important to me. Like Ari is saying that if he doesn't have one in front of him, how that comes together. I strongly believe, and you'll hear me saying it again and again, that people can be brought together to come to consensus, to have some conversations. What I don't want to see is what happened down at the end of Federal Street, where a house that Lafayette had stayed at was gut renovated and no longer has that historic value that it had. We can't continue to do those kinds of things. We are, in some ways, we are stewards of the past so that in the future our kids and their kids can learn the lessons that we need to learn from history. So I believe in a plan that will work and one that comes to consensus, and I would work very hard to make one happen.
I am against a local historic district. After attending probably 80 meetings in the first year when they were being discussed and planned by the local historic district planning commission, I learned a lot about the ins and outs of a local historic district. And during that time, I collected over 1,000 signatures along with a group of people that I worked with, of residents and registered voters who said that they did not want the local government dictating to them what they could or could not do with their homes. As a board member who may or may not know more about historic homes than the homeowner, and definitely is not going to care as much about their home as the homeowner does. I am for preservation, belonging to around 12 preservationist groups, and I would continue to look for other alternatives to preserving our downtown area.
This is an interesting question. The first home that I owned in Newburyport was a 1770s colonial down on Milk Street. I had an occasion to knock on their door this weekend. And I'm happy to say that the work we started then has been continued, and it's been lovingly restored by the present owners. We had made a good crack at it in the 6 years we lived there. If you'd seen me at that time, I was covered with plaster dust most of the time, and perhaps that has something to do with my affection for historic preservation and the unique assets that this city has. So many of us came to Newburyport because of a drive down High Street or through the neighborhoods where we admired the architectural assets that are unique to this community. There are few communities like Newburyport anywhere in America. And I think it's vitally important for us to do whatever we can in a public way to preserve those assets, to make it possible for the next generation and the generation beyond that to enjoy the historic assets that exist here. So I voted in favor of an LHD. I would again if they could address some of the serious property rights questions that were raised by the opponents the last time around.
Newburyport is obviously really rich in history. We have gorgeous homes, Greek Revival, Georgian, Federalist. I live in a Greek Revival. I love it. Since there's nothing before the City Council presently, I'm going to consider what's been discussed previously. And I think there's room for compromise. Getting rid of the all or nothing, it doesn't seem to have worked. And I think during the track race that was the LHD conversation, the baton got dropped, a lot of exhaustion overcame the council, and it's time perhaps to pick it up and consider what's going to go forward. So two things that I've found consensus is potentially finding its way. Downtown, protecting it. It sounds like it's more than shopping for most people. People go downtown to experience it. So there's an opportunity for a consensus. Secondly, demolition delay, considering from 12 to 24 months. That's an opportunity for consensus. I'm all open to consensus.
As most of you remember, I was a strong proponent of the local historic district. I thought the people that had worked in that local district study committee for many years were willing to compromise, made many significant changes that made it much less onerous to homeowners. And I think, quite frankly, it was really shanghaied by people who had an extremist agenda, who are afraid of government takeovers in other realms of our state and national politics. But at the local level, this is done in 200 communities in Massachusetts. This is not some sort of radically invasive communist plot to sap our precious bodily fluids. So I hope we can, to echo what Lindy just said, and Sheila Mullins said this last week, let's focus on downtown. Sheila mentioned proposing an LHD in the downtown. Those protections were in place till 2005, and working on demolition delay, which is currently stuck in committee, in the council, and let's try to make something happen. When City Councilor Katie Ives left to go to the Senate, there was a real push to try to get something done, but it's basically been dead in this council, and I hope we can do something next term.
I thought the last proposal was too large, too encompassing, and for lack of a better word, too nitpicky. But however, I hate to see beautiful houses get torn down. I've seen one on Marlowe Street near me, and there's one on Hancock Street. And they have all those nuances, those little nooks and crannies that you just don't see in modern houses. They tore down the one on Hancock Street and they put up this ginormous, I call it McMansion, and it just has no real character. It just looks like a box. So I would definitely be in favor of a demolition delay if we can save some of these unique houses. Thank you.
As an interior designer, I spend much of my life putting back into new houses a lot of the character that people are missing from the old houses.
I think your microphone's on.
Is my microphone not on?
Just gotta hold it a little closer.
Hold it a little closer. Okay, I'm sorry. You can't, at any cost today, especially at any reasonable cost, put into a new home what we have here in abundance. The other part is that I think we can all agree that we need to protect our historical downtown. In 2005, as Ed stole my thunder, all protections for the downtown were allowed to expire. Right now, if you or I were to purchase all of the downtown, we could place it under a one-year demolition delay, wait out the year, and then level the entire downtown and build whatever fit into the zoning. Think about that for a minute. Is that what we want? Our downtown is our biggest draw for our economy. We should seriously consider placing an LHD on the downtown for our fiscal and historical sakes. The other part that I would be looking at is to propose a demolition control. Whoops.
Yep.
Sorry, didn't see it.
I have tremendous respect for the people that worked on the LHD, and if it had come before me and I'd been a city councilor, I would have voted in favor of it. I found that the debate over the adoption of the historic district really just deteriorated into mudslinging and nastiness. And I'm not really sure what that was about, though Ed did touch on that. You know, it's time to really take a look at what this community is all about, and we are definitely an historic community. And I did not think that the provisions that were set out by the LHD were onerous at all. I thought that there was certainly an opportunity to have constructive conversation. And it wasn't about the people that live in the houses now that I was worried about. It was about the people behind them. So if the people that were in the houses now that are complaining or saying that they didn't want to have any of these conditions put on them, that's fine. They were saying we're not going to ruin our historic houses. What about the people behind them? I would be greatly in favor of a local historic district throughout the community.
Our next question will come from Kim Goby and be addressed to Bruce Menon.
Okay, so now I have a question that is actually right in the purview of City Council. So I hope that you all will give some thought to it, to how you will answer this. But currently, the City Council sets the fees and times for the paid parking system. What changes, if any, would you make to the current program, and why?
When I was on the Revenue Task Force, paid parking was right up there on the list of things that we thought could generate income. And to be perfectly honest, I strongly supported it because I thought there was something in it for us, and that is that some of those funds would be dedicated to the schools. That hasn't happened. That didn't happen. You know, I'm sure we'll be talking about the schools coming up and the need for dedicated revenues. I would consider, well, I can tell you this, I wouldn't have spent $400,000 paving over the Green Street lot. I think we could have lived with what we had. I would be very interested, I think, in looking at costing out whether adding fees to cars being parked there is viable or not. Restructuring the parking, I think it's working pretty well. It's certainly working very well for the business community when the lot's not closed down. It's doing fine. So.
I was against the paid parking, and after talking to several people, in the restaurant business and in small stores downtown. They felt that it did adversely affect them, along with the additional tax for the restaurants. And, but it's here now, and it sounds like it's going to stay. But again, it's turned into a tax. Where's the money gone, and why isn't it being used the way we were promised?
I voted in favor of the paid parking, and the reason was multifold. One, it would rationalize what it was at the previous times, a somewhat unorganized and inconsistent parking arrangement we had downtown. And number two, we had the revenue that we finally had needed for years in order to start working through the backlog of work that needed to be done in our streets and sidewalks. And that's where most of that revenue has gone, or a substantial portion of it. I think it's worked fairly well, but it's a little bit premature to talk about changing it, Kim. We've had a year and a half of exposure to this plan under our belts. I think another year or so we'll have the data that we need to make a decision about whether we want to change it. But right now, I'm fairly satisfied with the way it's operating and the way we're able to devote the revenue from the paid parking to things that we've wanted to do for a long time but couldn't afford.
We have a long list of needs. We're talking about schools and our needs relative to schools. We're talking about sidewalks and our needs relative to sidewalks. We're talking about the waterfront and our needs relative to the waterfront. This all costs money. We need to look for creative ways of getting the money without going to the property taxpayers all the time. I'm a fan of paid parking. I'm a fan as someone who frequents downtown to just spend time, to eat, to shop, and as someone who works downtown. We're adverse to change in this city to a certain extent. We have the paid parking. I wouldn't change it. Let it stand. What we could change is maybe perhaps the way we use the money. Consider what we use now. We're addressing the issues I just mentioned, and we could reframe how some of that money is used as we continue on.
Thank you for that question, Kim. I think it is something we should look at. Your question was specifically around the fees, and here's some of my thoughts on this. I actually think where we presently have the lots, I think it might make sense to lower the price on the lesser used lots, and right now those are currently the waterfront lots, to encourage people to park there and maybe let them park longer. What we want to do is keep the street, which is still free, moving and with as much turnover as possible. Some downtown merchants, as Lindy mentioned, are feeling a pinch that their customers don't have enough time, so we might want to look at extending some of the time in the Green Street lot in some of those options. If we're talking about revenue, this nets about $350,000 to $400,000 a year. Our annual operating budget is over $50 million, so $350,000 versus $50 million, it's a pretty small drop in the bucket. We need a garage downtown. I absolutely agree with that, and I sponsored the order that suggested that the Titcomb Street area be the site for a municipal parking lot. And if we're talking about revenue, maybe if we increase the fees for parking, we could pay for some of the park development and improvements that we want.
Well, Ed stole some of my thunder. He's copying me. But I initially was against paid parking, and the complaints I've heard are not being able to spend enough time shopping, going out to eat, people running back to the cars because they're so afraid they're gonna be ticketed. I would suggest maybe raising the time, maybe to 5 hours, and maybe that'll give people a little more time, and maybe they won't feel like they have to rush out of town getting a ticket. So that's my idea. Thank you.
Will you do me a favor? Will you repeat the question?
Sure, happy to. The City Council sets the fees and times for the paid parking system. What changes, if any, would you make to the current program, and why?
I just want to make sure I'm answering your question.
Thank you.
What I have heard from various merchants and even people in the community is that there just isn't enough time when they go downtown. If you go, let's just say you came in from North Andover and you wanted to come for lunch and do some shopping and do a little walking on the waterfront, a couple of hours just isn't enough. So to me, the most prudent thing to do would be to expand the number of hours that one can stay in the paid parking.
It just so happens that I have a tremendous amount of experience with parking downtown. And if you ever really want a place to park, just come on into the Roasters. So I walk through that parking lot every day, during the summertime in particular, through all the parking, whether walking up to the bank or just walking through town. And a tremendous amount of tourists and visitors come into my shop, and I talk to them about the parking. The one issue that comes to mind is the signage. There seems to be confusion over the signage and a misunderstanding of exactly how it all works, and I'd like to see an improvement there. I'd also like to see actually some shorter parking on the streets in some key areas so that you can, quicker turnover so you can run in and grab what you need and then move your car. In general, I think it's working. It certainly could use some tweaking. Not having a tremendous amount of personal experience with it because we have the parking permit, I'm not 100% clear on what we can do for ourselves. But in terms of people coming in from out of town, signage and perhaps a little bit of moving it around. Thank you.
You know, I live on Prospect Street. I live a block away from the public library. So I usually don't drive because these days I work out of my house. So I walk everywhere. And when I don't walk, I bike. And when I don't bike, I drive. And I see what happens downtown. Recent Yankee homecoming, I'm always able to park on my street. First block of Prospect Street, always able to park there, Yankee homecoming. The trouble was the recent Riverfest festival. I was meeting up with some friends who drove in from out of town who know Newburyport very well, and they had to park as far away as Lime Street and then walk over to the river. That's a problem, and that needs to be fixed. I don't know what has to happen, but something has to happen so when people come to the city during busy periods, they can park without walking a mile.
And we're back to John McCone for our next question, and it will go to Lindy Lamphere.
Okay. As a city councilor, you have the ability to propose different rules, have priorities that you put forward. Can you talk to us about one issue or a priority that you would like to accomplish as a city councilor and how you would go about doing it?
To be real honest, I hadn't given that question any thought, and I can't think of any rules that I would change on the city council, never being on the city council.
Could be any particular, changing zoning in the city, any particular issue that you're passionate about, you're interested in,
Well,
that you want to focus on.
I'm passionate about listening to the people of Newburyport and making sure that we're not working on our own agendas, but we're working on the thoughts and the wishes and the desires of the homeowners and the citizens of Newburyport.
I'll try to be specific, John. First and foremost, the thing that I'm most concerned about right now is zoning. Now, that sounds like inside ball and boring stuff to most of us, but that's what determines the quality of the construction that goes on downtown. We have a big developer downtown that owns most of the downtown property, and we set some markers down a number of years ago. 3 things that any development had to observe. 1, on-site parking. 2, a 30% footprint that was available to the public all the time. Courtyards, sidewalks, pass-throughs, that sort of thing. And 3rd, that it had to be architecturally consistent with the rest of the downtown. Those are not unreasonable things. But we just appropriated $60,000 to do something I've tried to do for the past 5 years, and that was to do a comprehensive review of all of our zoning. We have a downtown zoning ordinance that has overlays on it, and the seams between some of those somewhat conflicting ordinances is where developers play. That's where we are vulnerable, and I'm thrilled to see that we are finally addressing the issue of comprehensive rezoning with an eye toward what might happen a year, 2 years, 5 years down the road.
As I said, I'm a mom of 3 young sons, and we're all in the Newburyport Public Schools. Last year alone, we spanned 3 schools, the Brown, the Bresnahan, and the Mullen School. So I'm intimately aware of the conversations that are going on in the schools themselves, the playgrounds, the athletic fields. I'd like to serve as a conduit for a population that doesn't really show up around the council table. In addition, affecting the money that goes into the schools. As an NEF board member, I had my hand out for charitable contributions. That's what we were tasked with, to find ways to fund where our gaps were in the budget. As Chair of Port Pride, I had my hand out. I was looking for you to come along and say yes to a debt exclusion, so that was affecting your property taxes. So I've asked for, in two ways, I'd like to ask and affect it on the budget level, so that we can positively affect our schools, get foreign languages back, consider our arts, our athletic resources, our technology, the need for updates.
Something that I think is long overdue and is often talked about during campaigns and then left aside is sidewalks. And why they are important is certainly for folks that are disabled or parents that are pushing strollers, but it's really a quality of life issue that impacts our walkability and our viability as a city, both for ourselves as residents, but for tourists that are visiting. What I would like to see is not necessarily more money, but just better planning and coordination. A lot of municipalities across the country have what they call sidewalk management plans, and that's really just getting the stakeholders together, getting the data, making decisions and prioritizing. I think we need to prioritize walking routes. I think we need to prioritize downtown for brick sidewalks. Outside of downtown can be concrete. We need to work with the tree commission because trees are a big part of the problem as those roots have grown over the years. That's part of the reason why I supported paid parking, to try to bring in more revenue for downtown improvements, and the meals tax that helped us bring a lot more money to sidewalks.
One of the things I'm concerned about is affordable housing. I see the rents going up for apartments. I have friends that work in the same factory I work in. I have friends that work in restaurants, and I've heard them say, you know, we can't afford to live here. So I would be willing to work with the city council or any group that would be willing to try to bring the Chapter 40B more up to, because I don't think we're at 10%, are we? No, we're not. We need to be at 10%. I think it's the state mandate. Everybody of any economic shelf should be able to live here, no matter what your income is.
Infrastructure. Who has not lamented the city's lack of maintenance of infrastructure? In the new charter, we ensured that the city would have to create a 5-year capital improvement plan. Right now, that list is nothing more than a wish list. We actually need to set real priorities and start funding them in a predictable and fiscally sustainable way. Right now, for example, let's say that 20 streets are on the repair list, but we receive Chapter 90 funds for road improvements for 16. Instead of the last 4 that were on this year's list going on the top of next year's list, they go back into the bag for a new priority list. We all know those 4 streets didn't get any better over the winter, so why are they not on the top of the priority list for next year's? I don't know, but that's one example of what we need to be working on for infrastructure.
So many choices. Oh my gosh. One of the ideas that I have in mind that I would like to bring to City Council is the idea of working on an identity, if you will, program for the community. Understanding who we are, how we're seen, and how we can market the best that we have here. I'd like to see us work on rezoning the industrial park towards a business park. I think that issue could really enhance our ability to bring in more revenue, certainly through the tax base and those buildings that are out there, and perhaps even build some world headquarters right here in Newburyport. But generally speaking, it would be nice to put the city and the Chamber of Commerce together to work towards a marketing plan so that we understand who we are and that the community feels good about it. Are we a destination city? I believe we certainly are. How do we make best use of that, and how do we benefit from it? Thank you.
People in Newburyport know me as a technology geek, or the web geek, actually. Since long before I was elected to the city council, I've been blogging I've been Facebooking. I'm on and off of Twitter. I have an email newsletter and so forth. And so I understand technology. I understand the online world. And the thing is, I frequently go to the city's website at cityofnewburyport.com. I frequently look at the city's budget. I look at assessed property valuations. I look at other information. I look at the charter. But I cannot see certain information. Did you know, for instance, there is a long list of trust funds in the city? That information is not available on the city website. If you want it, you have to go to the city hall, go to the treasurer's office and ask for it. It's behind lock and key. It should be online. This Friday, the City of Newburyport is launching a new website at cityofnewburyport.com, and I'm hopeful that we'll be able to get more information on this website. Thank you.
I tend to try to look at things as connected to one another, so I don't have one single issue priority, but I have priorities. Having put in hundreds of hours working on creating the new charter, the idea of being on the city council as that charter begins to have an impact on the city starting in January is very interesting and very exciting to me. In particular, the rigor that we have tried to introduce to the city's fiscal management and fiscal reporting, I think is going to be very, very important. We hopefully no longer will be working on the city side and the school side budget, that in fact we will have a whole budget. And in fact, one of the things in the charter is that the mayor has to do a fiscal state of the city address in addition to a state of the city address. So again, that's part of transparency. that to me is very interesting. Ari, in our previous debate, raised an issue that I think also goes hand in hand with this, and that is that the city needs to go back and have a development person working on some of these issues with the chamber and with the rest of the community.
And Kim Goby has our next question, and it will be addressed to Barry Connell.
So every now and then, the idea of regionalization crops its head up. And for this question, I'd like you all to think about whether or not you support it, you don't support it, and whether there's some middle ground to that. Are there some areas or departments that you would think would benefit from it? If you could expand on that.
Thank you, Kim. I do support regionalization to the extent that we can provide services more efficiently to people at a cost that is lower or at least equal to if they're getting expanded services compared to what we're getting today. A couple of good examples. We're regionalizing our animal services. When you see a dead animal in the street, or perhaps someone has a dog running wild in the neighborhood, the individual who comes out and services that complaint is someone who is shared with other communities. We're now regionalizing our Veterans Affairs with some other communities in the area so that all the veterans in the region, not just those who have an active veterans agent, as we do in Newburyport, can benefit from their service in a way that helps them live within our communities and stay productive. So I do support regionalization, and I sometimes wonder why it is that we do everything independently of one another when there are opportunities like this that we can take advantage of.
I also support regionalization of services as long as the quality does not suffer. If the quality does not suffer, I'm a fan due to the fact that it just saves money. It makes smart sense. Again, we talk about the sidewalks, we talk about the waterfront, we talk about all these things that require money. If you have the option to move money elsewhere, you have more options.
Regionalization is something that's been talked about a lot more, and the state's been pushing that for a couple of years. It makes sense in some cases, and like a lot of things, it doesn't make sense in other cases. As Councilor Connell mentioned, we are embarking on a couple of initiatives with local communities around veterans, so sharing our veterans agent, also bringing in some part-time assistance, and that'll be less cost for us, and we'll get a better service out of that, and the animal control officer as well. Places where I don't think it works is right now, a lot of Essex County is doing a regional dispatch. So when you make a 911 call, if you live in Groveland, it'll go to a dispatch center, and I believe it's in Middleton. I think that would save us a tiny bit of money and be very complicated, and I think public safety is something you don't want to jeopardize, so I don't think that's a good place for us to go. I think something we ought to look at, and some coastal communities in New Hampshire have looked at, is the issue of sea rise and global warming. We are a sea community with riverfront, and obviously at Plum Island and along the downtown. That's going to be an issue, so I think that would be a good thing to collaborate with other cities on.
I do think it's a good way to save money, but as long as the quality of people's care isn't compromised, I think that's the most important thing to remember.
I think I'm going to start sounding like a broken record in comparison to everybody else. But yes, regionalization does make sense in some areas, and again, in other areas it doesn't. I think that it's a good thing for us to be working on that with the animal control and with the veterans. And I think if there are other areas that we can see, and I'm not at this point convinced that dispatch is necessarily a good spot, especially with what was in the newspaper, talking about some of the problems that the Essex County Dispatch Services have had. But I think it is something worth looking at in various cases. Thank you.
Knowing a couple of people that have had experience with regionalized dispatch, particularly of the police department, it doesn't seem like a particularly good idea. But we certainly would have to take a look at all of the regionalization or blending of services around. Certainly, taking a look at data would help the process. I don't have enough data to answer completely, other than to save, for the sake of saving money and loss of personal touch, I would be more in favor of personal touch.
Let's hope some of that data will be on the new site. Yeah, I support regionalization. I support partnerships. It's all great, you know. I'm sure there are other areas that we can regionalize, that we can partner. You know, I think it's great. I look at Plum Island, for instance. I don't know if you knew this. Every time the Plum Island Turnpike Bridge goes up, a scheduled opening, Newburyport and Newbury each send out fire apparatus, police apparatus, and an ambulance in case the bridge closes and it gets stuck, which has happened in the past, and then it's like, what do you do? So there's actually a protocol in place with the Coast Guards. Anytime there's a medical emergency on the island, bridge is stuck, the apparatus is already out there, they work with the Coast Guard up at the point, and they bring the injured or whatever person back to the mainland. That's a great example of, if you will, regionalization, a partnership between two abutting communities that share Plum Island. We can have things like that throughout the city.
I'm a big supporter of regionalization where it makes sense, and I think there are a lot of places where it makes sense. We've talked about, right now in Massachusetts, there's tremendous turmoil in the ambulance system, the delivery of ambulance services. So that may be an area that regionalization makes sense. Maybe it doesn't. There are a number of studies. Let's take a look at that. Veteran services makes really a lot of sense. You're able to have one person service a larger area. But one area that we haven't really done the kind of regionalization that I think we should has to do with sort of our environment. And I know this is very near and dear to Sheila's heart, but watersheds do not go according to city boundaries. And if we can begin to think about how we can work together to preserve some of our environment and preserve our watersheds and preserve our flyways for animals and birds, I think we haven't even begun to tap that yet. So I think I like the conversations about regionalization.
Last but not least, I'd want to study each suggestion first, and then make a decision on each suggestion. And I think most of them have already been mentioned, and I just would want to make sure that the services would not suffer.
Well, we have just enough time for our closing statements now, and we'll remind you that you each have 2 minutes for a closing statement, and we're going to go in the reverse order of our opening statements. Therefore, we'll start with Laurel Algrove.
I want to close by thanking everybody who came tonight and for listening to me and not booing me. I want to thank the Daily News for hosting this. I just want to close to say I really love this city. I'm passionate about it. I follow what goes on. And I'm concerned about the direction it's going in. I think we really need more transparency and involve the citizens more in what's going on so they're informed and not frustrated, because that's the sensation that I get, that I sense, that people tell me. And hopefully this can be really a city government of the people and for the people. Thank you.
Also, thank you everyone for being here, and thanks to the host for sponsoring this event. And I can't believe it's gone so fast. I hope it has been as exciting for those of you out in the audience as it has been up here. It is a bit nerve-wracking to try to say something coherent in 1 minute. So I am asking for your support on November 5th. I'm number 1 on the ballot through the luck of alphabetization and being an incumbent. I'm the leadoff hitter, so think Jacoby Ellsbury. And I'd appreciate one of your 5 votes for at-large counselor. I've tried to be a counselor who's not necessarily going to tell you what you want to hear. When I can do that, it's great, and we can have a great connection. When I have to differ sometimes with what people want us to do, that can be a bit painful, but I've often found we can find some common agreement somewhere down the line. I've tried to be a representative of you in your roles as taxpayers, as people who use our services, trying to get us the best services that we can as one of the 11 members of the City Council, working with Mayor Moak, working with Mayor Holliday, and trying to get those good services with as little cost as possible. The big issues before us are really the waterfront. I think the council needs to find a role in that conversation. Mark Twain once said that everybody talks about the weather, but nobody does anything about it. I want the council to do something about it. I think there is areas for consensus. There are many stakeholders down there, many old grudges, but we need to come together and involve the citizens of Newburyport and find a way to pay for it and figure out what it is we want down there. A parking garage needs to be a part of that. We need to spread that prosperity to the neighborhoods. Sidewalks are the things that we hear about. And that's something I want us to pay attention to. And although we haven't talked about it much tonight, the school building projects and dealing with those capital investments are certainly important, but what happens on a day-to-day basis in the classroom, getting language back at earlier ages, and really moving ahead and keeping our schools top-notch. So I ask for your support on November 5th. Go Red Sox, and thank you for being here.
Thank you for coming out tonight. I do cast a wide net. I have to say I connect easily with people from varied beliefs and values and ages across the city. This gives me an opportunity to really have perspective. It gives me an opportunity to consider all sides and not just to listen, but to really get it and get them. I told you some of my experience. After completing graduate school, I became a teacher. My job hinged on engaging the students. After that, I mentioned Port Pride. That was civic engagement at its best. After that, now I serve as community engagement director. It's in my title. My abilities to engage the community, that's where I find my strengths. I value an environment where you all can really get involved. I'm really happy for the new citizens petition mechanisms. I'm looking at Chip, who is part of that. This gives you a chance in the new charter. It states that you can really get involved actively and engage in the council. Tonight, I'm asking for you for your vote. I'm going to close you here. I want you guys to consider yourselves as the head of human resources or talent acquisition team. My goal is that you consider the council as a whole and bring a really diverse population around the council. We're not always going to agree on things, but I'm hoping you're going to hire a really talented, pragmatic, thoughtful, caring team to serve you. I'm hoping on one of your votes. I want to thank also WMVP and Daily News Newburyport for hosting the Greater Newburyport Chamber of Commerce. I appreciate you being here, considering that 8:07 p.m. was game time. Hope you DVR'd it. And I'm right in the middle of the ballot. Now, I'm not first, but I think it speaks to where I am very often, in the middle of the conversations. I find consensus by being in the middle. So I'm in the middle of the ballot. So please, vote for me, Megan Kinsey, Councilor at Large, on Tuesday, November 5th. Thank you.
Well, Well, I too want to thank you all for coming out, and thank you for hosting this event tonight. I'll bet you and I have had a similar experience in that we go to other places in the state and people say, gee, where are you from? And you say, I'm from Newburyport. And they all say, oh, I love Newburyport. I love the shops. I love the theater. I love the restaurants and the bars and the places. And going down High Street's a thrill. You see all this architectural evidence of our past that's on display. And the neighborhoods have been beautifully maintained and brought up to snuff. The schools look like they're moving in the right direction. But it's not by accident that that happened. That happened because of the hard work that you have done for decades and the work that we continue to do today. It's through a partnership of the City Council and the Mayor and all the employees of the city. Most important, it's a partnership with you. You know, I've been knocking on doors for the last few weeks, more than the last few weeks, it seems. That's why my knuckles are so sore. And what I continually hear from people, I ask them, what's going well, what's going poorly? What most people think is that Newburyport is a great place to live, and there's really not much that they complain about. Oh, there are some things around the margins. There are issues here and there. But for the most part, what people believe is that Newburyport is a wonderful place to live. How did it get here? It's through this partnership, but also because you can't spit on a sidewalk without having 6 people stand around and point at it and start an argument, and 2 more to start a petition to the City Council. So what I'm pledging to you is what I pledge every time I run, and I've run now. This would be my 6th term if I'm successful and elected again. I will listen to you. I will exercise my best judgment. I will work cooperatively with everyone on our City Council and in City Hall. I will also vote my conscience based on what I think is best for all of the city and not based on any loud or shrill voice. I think that's what you've come to expect, and that's what I expect to deliver. Thank you for coming out.
My business background, I think, is going to be needed on the Newburyport City Council. The city currently has obligations in the form of bonds for the City Hall, the police station, the high school, the middle school, the library, our new water and sewer plant, and we have yet started to pay the bonds for the new Bresnahan School or the senior center. And that does not cover all of our debt. I'm a numbers cruncher, and my business background, and with my business background, I can help the city meet its obligations and help conserve and save money. Thank you.
I'm asking for your vote to be a city councilor at large. I've spent a lot of time around the government of Newburyport, and I have moved through my life and through my experience in government with some core principles that are really important. You know me. I've always worked hard. I have always done my homework. I have always tried to listen and make sure that I understand what people are saying. I've tried to engage the community. I've tried to be transparent. I have been painfully honest at times, much to some people's discomfort. But I think you deserve no less than that. I've spent my life in human services. I understand. I've spent over 20 years working with homeless people. I understand the range of needs in a community, and I would like to continue to do service on the City Council. For me, these are all the important things. Continued improvement in the schools, ensuring a more transparent, open, engaging, and accountable government. That is very important. Creating healthy recreational opportunities for kids, for adults here in town. Finding a consensus solution to the waterfront. I believe we can find one. It's not going to be what everybody wants, but I think it's out there. Identify new, robust alternatives to taxes and debts to bring revenue into the city. I support one of the most underutilized commissions in the city is the Disability Commission, and I would really like to see them more involved in the conversation about the community that we want to be. I don't think it was Mark Twain who said, everybody wants to go to heaven, but nobody wants to die. We need to make some difficult decisions And I have always tried to do that as honestly and transparently as I can. I ask for your vote for the City Council. Thank you.
Thanks again to our hosts and our sponsors for bringing us all together here. Did I tell you earlier that I love this job? Let me tell you about it. There are 11 seats on the City Council, 6 award councilors representing specific geographies, and 5 at-large councilors who represent the whole city. I'm one of your current at-large councilors, and I'm asking you to re-elect me to a 3rd term. Councilors, whatever we are, at-large award, we do 3 things, and we only do 3 things. 1, we approve expenditures from the city's treasury. 2, we confer mayoral appointments to department heads and to boards. And 3, we write laws. So what have we done? Well, we adopted the State Green Communities Act. We began enhancing transit services for residents and commuters. We asked Google to bring their fiber optic broadband service here, but it went to Kansas City instead. We created off-leash dog areas in 3 city parks. We fought increases in property taxation and user fees. And most recently, we purchased streetlights from National Grid, and that will save us about $75,000 each year. I campaigned 4 years ago to create a river taxi program to connect downtown Newburyport with the Salisbury State Reservation. And I'd like to single out in the room here Bill Taplin and Bill Harris, sitting on opposite ends of the auditorium, they're eager to make this vision a reality. And we are working with Representative Costello and Senator Ives to make this happen. Your job is to elect the best people who are knowledgeable and committed to improving government. It's as simple as that. We have to work together, those on the council and with the people who are you. We have to narrow the gap between City Hall and the city. I'm open to change. I hope you are too. I have the background, I have the commitment, but most of all, I have the passion. You can learn more about me on my website at councilorariherzog.com, and that has links to everything else. And please vote on November 5th. Thanks again.
I'll be brief. My qualifications, the clarity of my principles and thoughts on the issues is on my website, vogelatlarge.com. And I would encourage you to take a look through it. As your counselor, my obligation to you is to listen and to be open to your ideas and your thoughts. You have my promise that I'll be accessible. You can always come down and see me at the roasters. I wish I could say, can I say this? Can I say a coffee in every pot? I'll always be fair and I'll work as hard as I can. I just go after it. A tremendous amount of passion and tremendous amount of interest. I try to apply a little bit of humor. I'm comfortable leading when it's necessary, and I'm just as comfortable following. I came across a quote that I put on my website, and I'm going to read it, and I hope you can understand it. It goes like this. It says, "A politician thinks of the next election. A statesman of the next generation." Now that may be, you may be thinking anyway, that that's quite a bold statement for somebody running for city council of a small city in Massachusetts. It's how I feel. I would greatly appreciate your vote, and I would look forward to serving you. Thank you all, and thank you all.
I'd like to thank the Daily News, the Chamber, WNBP, and Port Media for sponsoring this event, and thank each one of you who are watching. I knew when I moved here with Jerry 26 years ago that this was as far as we were going. I fell absolutely head over heels in love with Newburyport, and it's a love affair that I hope to continue. I would like to be able to work on my top 3 issues, should you choose to elect me, doing my part to help keep an open, non-privatized waterfront, to seek for a strategic capital improvement plan to deal with our infrastructure, and to really be very, very mindful of our budget, to keep our city affordable for everyone, because everyone here matters and everyone here contributes to our community. I will listen, engage, and respond to you. I thank you for your time, your consideration. Please check my website, SheilaMullins.com. I am Sheila Mullins, and I ask you for your vote.
And with that, we'd like to thank our candidates for giving of their time this evening. I would like to thank our timekeeper, Ann Ormond, and our panel of Kim Goby from the Greater Newburyport Chamber of Commerce, John McCone from the Newburyport Daily News, and I'm Pete Falcone from WNBP. A reminder that next Tuesday night in this very hall, the candidates for mayor will engage in a debate, again starting at 7:30 and presented by the Greater Newburyport Chamber of Commerce, the Daily News, WNBP, and Port Media. And we hope to see you back again and be listening again next Tuesday night for the next debate. Thank you. Have a safe trip home. Thank you.